Final Fantasy 16 is one of the best gaming experiences I've had in years. Yes, I know, to some of you that may sound absurd, like with all the reception or mixed reception that the game has been getting, it's like, how could this game give you such a good feeling? And that's what it all boils down to, honestly. The feeling. I played a lot of good games. Of course, we got the God of Wars, we got Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man, the big AAA games that are super solid, super fun, good stories. But for whatever the reason, they just didn't catch me how this game did. Don't get me wrong, this game is not perfect by any means. This game is very flawed. It deserves a lot of the backlash that it has received. I'm not gonna lie to you. And a lot of this, as anything else, is just my personal opinion and it's personal bias. My experiences with games is gonna be different from a lot of people. For instance, people complain about this game's cutscenes, calling it a movie simulator or cutscene simulator, right? But cutscenes don't really bother me. My favorite game series is Metal Gear Solid, so I grew up watching 10-hour long cutscenes, and honestly, it didn't bother me. Of course, when I go and replay those games, I don't always watch all the cutscenes nowadays, but I didn't see that as a detriment to the game. I loved Metal Gear Solid despite the cutscenes. And same thing with this game. Final Fantasy 16 is very story driven. And you can tell that the developers did care about what was going on with the narrative. Some stuff is a little confusing. I'm not gonna lie. It did have me like,
what are you talking about?
But overall, the story was very compelling. I was invested in its characters and really wanted to see how it ended and how things wrapped up. And Square Enix even went the extra mile to try to help players like myself understand the story and the lore better by giving us the active time lore, which can be accessed during any cutscene and help you understand what's going on better, whether it's the characters, the environment that you're in, or the overall plot. It's all there, and I think more games should incorporate this. It's something like, it sounds simple now, like it sounds like, oh, like everyone should have done this, but no one did. So hey, like, shout out to Square Enix for putting this in the game and actually taking the story seriously, and also considering the fact that some players aren't going to know what the heck's going on in some of these instances. Most of the story is very easy to follow. Like I said, there was only like one thing really that really confused me, but it's just dope that they went the extra mile to do that for players. So again, shout out to Square Enix for that. I've heard some people call this game's story very bleak and basically a sad, dark story from beginning to end. But honestly, I didn't get that vibe. Yes, in the beginning, like if you played the demo or if you played the game, the beginning of the story is super dark. And honestly, when I played the beginning of the game, I was like, damn, like I was expecting that tone throughout. But without giving too much away, I was very surprised to see how much lighthearted moments were in this game. There's jokes, there's moments of hope, there's moments of happiness. You know, like the game isn't just people frowning all the time. Mind you, you go to certain areas and people do be going through it, I'm not gonna lie, but it's not like what I was expecting. Like, from what I would hear other people say, I thought I was just gonna be having my head down the whole game, like, damn, man, like, guess I'm gonna have to fight this guy. Oh man, he just killed everybody, I'm gonna have to fight. I just thought it was gonna be super depressing and all of that. But no, like, the game had a lot of lighthearted moments. And the characters, obviously carry this game's story. But yeah, like I'm saying, the characters make jokes, the characters have hope, the characters are sometimes sad, yes, but you see them overcome each obstacle. And the moments that do hit, like the quote unquote sad moments, they don't feel sad just for the sake of being sad. Everything has a good build up, whether it comes to the triumphant moments or the more dark moments. There is an actual crescendo to it instead of just pushing it in your face like, okay, here, be sad, okay, here, be this. So in my opinion, the developers did a really good job at balancing things when it comes to the emotions and actually making you care about what's going on. The characters are very well written, as is the case with most Final Fantasies. Final Fantasy's characters have always carried these games, and this game is no exception. Characters like, of course, the main character Clive, Jill, Sid, Torgal, Dion, Gav. Man, there's so many good characters in this game, and each character stands out. Even like the NPC characters have some pretty interesting stories, and I'll get more into that when I talk about the gameplay sides. But yeah, each character stands on their own. Each character felt like they belonged in this world. They felt like they weren't just thrown in just for the sake of being in the game. The characters have their own backstory, their own motivations. The villains don't just seem like villains for the most part. A lot of them have some very deep stories, and you can see why they would end up going down certain paths. So that was definitely something that I appreciated. You can see a lot of elements from different Final Fantasies when it comes to the story as well. Some stuff reminded me of 7, some stuff reminded me of 8, and obviously a lot of this game is gonna remind people of Final Fantasy 14 because it has the same director. But yeah, you can see different elements throughout this game, not just with the story but with the gameplay. And that's something that, from what I know, is the main criticism that this game received for its gameplay. Now, this is where things get tricky. Final Fantasy XVI's gameplay is really what sold me on the game, but at the same time is far from perfect, and I can see why people would have certain reservations towards it. Although this isn't Final Fantasy's first attempt at being more action focused, they advertised it that way, and they did bring in Devil May Cry's combat director in order to shake things up, I'm guessing. In my opinion, they succeeded. It just has a really slow start. In the beginning of this game, I honestly was pretty underwhelmed by the combat. I felt like I was just pressing square over and over again, just doing the same quote unquote combos over and over again. If I'm being honest, that's how I felt when I first played the game. I was like, it's cool, but when's things gonna open up? That's what I was asking myself. And then I believe once you get the second icon, icons are the beasts that certain characters wield. They call the characters dominants. But basically, like Ifrit, Garuda, those creatures, those are icons. And once you got your second icon, that's when things really started to open up in terms of gameplay. At least to me, I was having much more fun after that point in the game. And it's not that far into the game that you even get your second icon, but yeah, every time you get an icon, the gameplay opens up. You get more moves, you get new ways to approach certain situations in terms of mobility. So I'd say after the first couple hours or so of the game, that's when I really started to enjoy the combat, and I started to see more of the vision of what they were going for. You're gonna see obvious influence from Devil May Cry, of course. You're gonna see influences from the other games as well. But overall, the combat is really fun, but it's what you make of it. This is one of those games where if you want it to be super easy, you can make it super easy, but in my opinion, that's just lame. That's boring. Like, I don't want to just be tapping square the whole time and just beating everybody, right? There are accessories that you can place on Clive that will make things significantly easier. One, I believe, is called the Ring of Timely Assistance, and that will basically help you dodge to the point where you don't even gotta press a button, the game will dodge for you. Things like that make the game easier, but probably will take away from the fun factor or the rewarding feeling that you get from defeating an enemy on your own. At least in my opinion. You get other accessories as well that add to the experience. Stuff like invulnerability for 30 seconds and boosting your icon's damage for like 50 seconds. Things like that can change the gameplay a bit. So you don't gotta just make things super easy. You can add accessories that add some fun to the game without diminishing the game's sense of reward or the challenge. That being said, this game is relatively easy for the most part. You'll probably rarely die as long as you have potions. And if you do die, they restock your potions, so I mean, there's that. At the same time, this game is pretty challenging though. There's some parts later on in the game where I was like, damn, if I didn't have potions, I'd probably get my ass kicked. The potions were saving me a lot of times, honestly, but yeah, there's a bunch of fights where I was like, okay, this is actually pretty challenging. Surprisingly, I don't really want to spoil nothing, but it's not a spoiler really, but I'll just say some encounters that I expected to be more challenging ended up being less challenging than I thought, and vice versa. The main complaints I have for this game in terms of the gameplay really just boil down to sponginess in the enemies. There's a lot of times where you're fighting a boss and you just feel like you're hitting a dude for like 30 minutes and you barely get half of their health down. That stuff I'm not a fan of, and this is something that I've run into before in previous games where I felt like, oh, I'm just beating on this dude for like 30 minutes and nothing happening. And of course you gotta fill up the stagger bar in order to do real damage on them, and it's just I never was really a fan of that, honestly. It just, the enemies just feel too spongy at times. Another complaint that I had with this game was the mission structure. In terms of like side missions and even the main missions, it's not much of an open world. This game's actually way linear than I expected it to be. And I didn't mind that, but because it does have some very open sections, it makes it more obvious that it's lacking compared to other games like The Witcher or something of that level. You're gonna notice right away, like, okay, I can't really traverse that much in this game. You're just gonna be running around on foot for the most part. Some areas you can't even jump over the rocks. Like, I tried jumping over some rocks in some areas. You could even climb up them. You just have to go all the way around, and things like that does make it feel a bit dated. And most of the time when you're selecting missions, you're just going to be fast traveling from mission to mission. Especially with the main story, you're not really going to be doing a whole lot of exploring. You're mainly just going to be pulling up the map and picking where it's gonna go. Again, I didn't mind this because I actually enjoy linear games. I can just see why people would have a problem with this, which is why I bring it up. I'm trying to be as honest as possible about the game because I can see the flaws in the game. I can see why people would be annoyed with certain things when it comes to gameplay and how the mission structure is. Another thing, as far as missions go, the side missions, side missions or whatever. They're basically just a bunch of fetch quests. I did a lot of them, but by the end of the game, I definitely was like, yeah, I'm gonna just skip some of these because, I didn't care by that point. I'm not gonna lie. There are some interesting side missions though. There are some missions where I did feel invested in what was going on. I do think that the side missions serve a purpose. I don't think that they're pointless per se. Like, they actually do add to the story, they add to the lore, and they do some interesting things at times. But as soon as you start playing, you realize like, okay, I'm just going to grab this, I'm going to grab that. It adds to the story though, yes. It does add to the story, and they do add some layers to the game if you're trying to learn more about the lore and all that. But I can't say like I enjoyed all the side missions. Most of the side missions I was like, whatever. I was just doing them just to do them. So that's one thing to keep in mind about this game. The main missions, oh man, that's why I love this game. It's because of the main missions and that stuff. The side missions, the traversing on your own, but all that didn't matter to me. Simply because this game gave me something that I have been wanting for years. Asura's Wrath 2. If you played Asura's Wrath, you already know. That's one of the most crazy, hype, exaggerated games to ever be released. Yes, it did lack in terms of gameplay, but if you ask most people if they like Asura's Wrath, they're gonna say yes. All because of how hype it was and the spectacle that the game presented. This game is no different. It's actually kind of better as a game than Asura's Wrath. Like, you get more gameplay in this game than Asura's Wrath gave you. But it's like, imagine Asura's Wrath if you had some more gameplay, but you still had the bombastic set pieces, the spectacle. If you threw all of that and mixed it with Devil May Cry gameplay and then some Final Fantasy story, that's what you get with this game. And it's because of that that I was able to overlook, and I'm sure most of you probably heard this before, like, oh, the game is kind of whatever. But when the game has its highs are the highest highs you could ever reach in a game. Like, the set pieces in this game give God of War 3 a run for its money. That's how crazy it is. It's up there with Asura's Wrath. Asura's Wrath has some crazy set pieces, so I'm like, it's hard for me to say that it's better than that, but it's up there with Asura's Wrath for sure. It's like right next to Asura's Wrath in terms of spectacle. This game had me smiling from ear to ear at some points. I was like, bro, this game is so sick. That was my reaction Every time there was a big boss fight or just a big moment in the game, I was hype. And it just gave me a feeling that I have not felt in so long. I've played so many good games, like God of War Ragnarok. The Resident Evil 4 remake was amazing too. That did give me a good feeling. But it's just something, there's something different when it comes to these super outrageous hype moments in a game that it just does something to me. Like Metal Gear Rising, oh, like hype. Those of you who played it, you already know, like the music with the boss fights made the game. The boss fights made that game. Mind you, the game was dope. It was a dope action game throughout. But when I think back to Metal Gear Rising, I think of the boss fights. I think of the music and the hype moments. Same thing with Asu's Wrath, and even like God of War 3. When I think of God of War 3, I think of the boss fights. This game falls into that same category where when I look back on this game, I'm not going to remember the side missions. I'm not going to remember a lot of stuff with the linear world, so to say. I will remember the hype as fuck moments from the boss battles and the story. I will remember the spectacle of fighting. I can't even spoil, man. I'm not gonna spoil nothing, but some of the stuff that happens in this game is just so crazy. The most crazy I've ever seen in a Final Fantasy game. And Final Fantasy has some wild moments, but like seeing it in this fashion with the graphics and everything, it's like everything I imagined with the old ones, or like how you thought things would be in the old ones, has been fully lived out through this game. You can picture how a battle. I can't even go too far. I was already about to spoil something, but it's crazy. The boss battles, like the really hype boss battles at least, do so much for this game. And it just reminded me of how things used to be. Back in the day when I would play games like say PS2, Dream, the older games, I couldn't always tell if a game was bad. There were games that I liked more than others. But when I was a kid, I couldn't always tell if a game was trash. There's some games I liked as a kid I go back to now and I'm like, damn, this sucks. But the games gave me such a good feeling playing them at the time that I didn't care how they played per se. And I ain't saying this game is that bad, because this game's not a bad game at all to me. Like, it has flaws, but like I said, I enjoyed the combat. The combat opens up a lot. I didn't like the spongy enemies, but the combat does open up a lot. I didn't like the side missions. The story was really good. I was about to say amazing. It probably not amazing, but the hype moments, like the boss fights, yes, that's amazing. That's 11 out of 10. The boss fights alone be 11 out of 10. But yeah, like there's flaws in this game, but the game does so well at making you, or at least making me, in this case, feel something that it's hard to knock it. Like, this game actually made me feel hype. It's hard for games to do that for me these days, because a lot of games I be feeling like I'm playing the, I've played some good games, but I don't know, it started to become more formulaic. This game reminds me of an older game, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, right? But mainly because it gives me that feeling like, man, this is such a sick game. And it gives me such a good feeling playing it that even though I can see the flaws, I don't care. Like, I don't see it as a bad game. Other games, if I see the flaws and it's like too trash, or if it's too many flaws, I'll be like, okay, this isn't really a good game. This game, it was like, I can see the flaws, but man, the hype moments are so hype that like I said, it's just hard to knock it. And that's why I get so excited when I'm talking about it even now, because the game just really made me feel something. It made me feel something. The dark moments were dark. The happy moments were cool. Like, you're rooting for these characters to win. You're rooting for these characters to prevail in the story and how things wrap up. I did enjoy. I was satisfied with the ending, but I gotta admit, it's all thanks to the hype moments and the boss battles that I even made it through the game. The game is long. I put like 60 hours in this game, which I wasn't expecting. I thought I was gonna only put like 30. That's why when I got to the point where I put 30 hours in, I was like how long? I was like, how much longer do I got on this damn game? But it didn't matter because they more than make up for it with the boss fights. The big boss fights. Man. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with this game. I admire Square Enix for not just trying to be like all the current games that are out. This game feels like a love letter. The games I mentioned before, like Asura's Wrath, Metal Gear Rising, God of War, things like that just gave me such a good feeling while playing them. Gave me such good memories and things that I'm always gonna look back on and be like, man, that was a good experience. Because it all boils down to the experience. And my overall experience with this game was really good. It really stuck with me. I believe people are a bit too harsh on games sometimes these days. Like, people just love saying a game is terrible and bad. And I'm like, have you really played a terrible game? I've played some games that were like unplayable and just legitimately bad games. When I look at Final Fantasy 16, I don't see a bad game. I see a not perfect game. It's flawed. But at the same time, it's one of the most rewarding experiences in terms of the moments. Like, the moments will stick with you. And obviously, this isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea. As I mentioned earlier, before I even played the game, I had seen a lot of the negativity surrounding it. So I came into the game expecting some stuff to be a little jank or whatever. But despite everyone's criticisms and even my own criticisms, I still had a blast with this game. If you're expecting a full-fledged RPG, don't. This game is kinda in the middle between action and RPG. It definitely leans more on action, like Devil May Cry style game, but the RPG elements are there, just very, very bare bones. Even when it comes to your weapons, you're mainly going to be using the same sword. Well, what feels like the same sword all the time. You can upgrade it, make it stronger, and you can change how it appears, but it will function the same. The only real gameplay changes come from the different icons and the accessories that you add. And of course, you can upgrade the icon skills and do different moves, adding more damage, etc. You get all that stuff, but like I said, don't come expecting Skyrim or The Witcher or something like that. It's not even as fully fleshed out, I'd say, as Final Fantasy VII Remake was when it comes to the RPG elements. So if you're not into the more action-based games, you might not like it too much. And if you're, especially if you're a Final Fantasy fan that's more used to the turn-based style, I don't know if you'll like this one too much. Final Fantasy VII Remake did a good job of balancing action with a kind of turn-based like style. The approach reminded me of a turn-based game, but at the same time it still felt like I was playing a action-y game or hack and slash game too. So they did a good job there. This game is more action focused. which I did enjoy because my favorite games are action games. But everyone's going to have their own opinion, their own take on it, their own preference when it comes to these games. I'm just trying to be as honest as possible while also giving the game some credit, because the game is not a terrible game. It's not a bad game by any means. I've seen some people say it's just trash. I don't agree. Of course, that's just my opinion, but I don't agree. I think this game is one of the most hype experiences I've had in quite a while. In the beginning, I did think the game was pretty standard. It does open up as you progress. Like most games, you got the skill trees and stuff, so the game does give you more options. It does give you more freedom when it comes to the combat. Some people won't be blown away, especially if you played some of the other games or the games that inspired this game. But it's solid. It's not bad by any means. My main problem when it came to combat was from the enemies. Just wailing on them for 40-50 minutes, it felt like. Just waiting for the stagger bar to go down. Things like that have kind of always bothered me in Final Fantasy 2. But yeah, besides that, and like I said, the mission structure, besides that, I have no real complaints. The story was really good, kept me invested the whole time, and the set pieces are what make this game. The set pieces make this game what might seem like honestly like a normal, like an average, solid, I'll say solid action game. The set pieces take this up so much, man. It does so much for this game. And like I said, it's not gonna be everyone's cup of tea. Some people don't care, like, all I care about is strictly what's going on besides the story and besides the set pieces. And I understand everyone's different, but from the combat to the set pieces and the story, I really enjoyed this game. And if you're like me and you like the Asura's Wrath or any of the other games I mentioned, oh, you gotta play this. It's mandatory. It might feel a little sluggish at first, but each moment, oh man, as you play this game, each moment literally tops the last moment. It's so crazy, man. In a good way, it's crazy. So give it a shot. As for me, I'm about to get on some Mortal Kombat, because you already know it came out a couple days ago, and that's what I've been on. Not sure if I'm gonna end up doing a review on it, but we'll see. If you guys have any questions or you want to talk gaming, whether it's Final Fantasy, Mortal Kombat, anything, feel free to leave it in the comments. I'm happy to engage in conversation. I actually enjoy it. If you like this game, let me know. If you didn't like the game, what your pet peeves were, feel free to leave it in the comments. And I hope all of you have a wonderful day. This is Solid J. Take it easy.